Hello everyone, welcome back to this course. In the last few lectures, we have learned about the fundamentals of Express.js, from creating routes to understanding middlewares as well as something like error handling. In this lecture, we are going to bring everything together and build something meaningful with the help of it. And the application that we will be building in today's lecture is going to be a task manager application that we will build using Express and TypeScript. The goal of this lecture will be to give you a holistic view of how real world Express applications are built and extended. And in order to proceed with that, I have already set up a Node.js and a TypeScript project where I have already installed the required dependencies. As if I will navigate to the package.json, you could see that I have already installed Express here. Along with that, I have already installed the types for the Express, the types for the Node.js ecosystem, the NodeMon, so that when we start our application once, we don't need to restart it again and again whenever we make any small changes to the application. TS node so that we can allow TypeScript to run directly, and TypeScript, which is a compiler to convert a TypeScript code base into JavaScript. And this project has the same scripts as we used in the last session as well. We are going to be using this JavaScript in today's lecture too, which will help us running our application in the development environment using the NodeMon tool. The remaining two commands, build and start, will be mainly used for the production environment purpose, where we will first use the build command in order to convert a TypeScript code base into JavaScript. And once we deploy that JavaScript code to our production server, we can make this Express application up by running this npm run start command, which will in turn run this node dist index.js. All right. If you look at the tsconfig.json, this is the exact same configuration as we had used in the last lecture. So, all right. What we will do is we will start by implementing standard CRUD operations for managing tasks, and we will take it one step further by adding a useful feature that is going to be the task reminders. All right, we will talk about this feature in more details going forward into this lecture. But if we were to, just list down all the features that we are going to be building in today's lecture, and those features include creating a task in a task manager application, reading all the tasks that have been created so far. If you want to read a given task, then you will have to provide a certain identifier for that particular task in order to read all the details related to it. If you wish to update a task, apart from that, if you want to delete a task, if you want to mark a task as completed, and as I was telling about something related to the reminders, then we are going to be implementing a feature that is going to fetch a list of all the tasks who or which rather have a deadline that falls in a particular time frame that we will probably provide in the request parameter itself. And before we proceed further, let us first discuss about this thing as well. So to keep the thing simple, what we are going to do is we are going to keep all the data. That means all the tasks that we will be creating in this Express and TypeScript application. We will keep all of them in memory using a basic array. And in a real world application, this would typically be replaced with a database. But since this is the very first application that we are building with the Express.js and TypeScript, we just want to keep it simple. So now let's get started. And the very first thing that we will do here is to define an interface for how a task is going to look like in our application. That means, which all properties a task is going to be holding or containing. So a task is going to look something like this. A task is going to look something like, say, reminder at, and this is going to be date. and I would make it an optional property as well. That means any object that you will create and assign it or annotate it with the type task, then that object must have at least the properties like ID, name, deadline, created at, updated at. In addition to that, it can have a couple of optional properties. One is completed at, and the other one is reminder at. Okay. Uh, since we are going to be writing our entire application in a single file as of now, going forward into this course, we will learn, about certain practices that we follow, for creating a basic project structure for our Express and TypeScript applications. But for now, to keep things simple, we are going to be putting everything into a single file, that is this index.ts file itself. So maybe I can just collapse this file menu from there. And now it's time to basically define a global simple array where we are going to be storing all the tasks that this application is gonna be creating, or that we plan to keep in memory for this particular application. Okay. Keeping the data in the memory also means that all the data will be lost and on every application shutdown and restart. We also need to keep this in mind, so we don't need to make a change every time and test that behavior, because whatever tasks that we would have created before or updated before would be lost as and when we make a refresh in this application. So here is a tasks array. The name is going to be tasks, and I am going to annotate it with this task, and I would assign it an empty array as its default value. Okay. And as you are able to see here that our task definition requires an ID here. Now we have a few options available with us, in order to, fulfill this requirement of a task having an ID. Either we can generate an auto-incremented ID, but that would require some custom logic from our end since we are not using database as of now. Or to keep things simple, we can use the UUID package to generate unique IDs. And in order to do that, we will first have to install the UUID package using the npm or the node package manager. And since we are using this inside a TypeScript project, we will also be installing the type definitions for the UUID, but we will installing those types as the dev dependency. So what I'll do is I will open the terminal. All right. And here in the terminal, what I'm going to do is firstly, I'm going to install the UUID. So the UUID is installed. And the next thing that I'm going to be installing is going to be the types for UUID. So I would say npm install types UUID. But remember, we have to install it as a dev dependency. And if we need to install something as a dev dependency, in that case, we are going to add this save dev configuration or this flag so that we can add this in the dev dependency list of a package.json file. So now that we have installed it, I will collapse this terminal as of now. So now that we know that this is actually installed in our node modules folder that also exists in our project directory, so we can actually import it in our index.ts file. And how do we import it? We will import it like v4. Here is the v4. So I have imported it from UUID. But just to make sure that when we will use this v4 function for generating random IDs, it should be obvious for us while writing the code as well that we are trying to generate some UUIDs. So what I'll do is I will import it as some another name. So generally the convention is we rename it to UUID4. UUID is going to be the indication that we are going to be generating UUID, and 4 represents the version for the UUID that we are using. So yeah, we have also imported this UUID in our index.ts file. And now it's time to implement the basic CRUD operations. And we shall start with the create task endpoint. So as you know that this is a fresh application and there are no route implementations written as of now. So the very first route implementation that I will add here is going to be for creating a task. So this is the definition that we are using here. And if you will look at here, then it is actually generating an error saying that UU or cannot find name this UUID4. And this means we have actually made an error while renaming it. So I have written it as UUID4. So rather I should say it UUIDB4 so that this warning should go away. Now, if you look at it, if you look at this route implementation for this post request that is sent to an endpoint named task, it uses HTTP post as the request method. In addition to that, it actually requires some data to be sent in the request body of this HTTP post request so that a task with that information could be created. So this endpoint, requires the name, the deadline, and reminder at. So currently, if you would take a look here, then reminder at is not a mandatory property. If it would be provided, then it would be used as it is. Otherwise, we are using a default value of undefined. So this reminder at is actually an optional property here. But wait, would you like to guess that what happens if the request body does not include all the required fields? In such an instance, our application might crash, right? So we have to make sure that we validate, this request body parameters that we are receiving in this post request for the task endpoint, right? Otherwise, it could, lead to an application crash. So that is why it becomes important for us to do some validation before actually processing this request. And if you can recall from the last lecture, we learned about a concept called middlewares. And this is a perfect place to use the middleware. So what I'm going to do is I am going to define a middleware function. Okay, so this is the middleware function that is validate task body. What it does is it accepts 3 arguments: request, response, and next. What it does is it firstly tries to extract name and deadline from the request.body. That means these 2 parameters must be present in the request body of a request. And if either of this property is not present, in that case, we are returning the response to that request with a status code of 400 and an error saying both name and deadline are required and the request is missing those. But in case this condition does not get fulfilled, then this return statement will not be executed and this next function will be executed. And calling next function means the control will be transferred to the next middleware or the route handler. Now we have 2 options of adding this middleware in our Express.js pipeline. One is we could make use of app.use method in order to apply this middleware function globally across all the routes that we will even be creating going forward. Or the other way is to add it specifically in some routes which require this type of validation to be performed. And as you know that a request is expected to have name and deadline only in case of creating a task. Probably we will require the same type of middleware when we will try to update a task, but even in that case, we might not want to update all the properties. So we shall discuss about that thing, later or in the later section of this lecture. But for now, I am going to use this as a middleware function for this post request. Okay. Now, though we could test this API now itself to check whether a task is getting created or not, and then implement the rest of the APIs. But since we are maintaining all the tasks in memory as of now to keep everything simple, then every app restart is going to flush all the existing tasks that we would have created by then. So to save time, let's implement the rest of the APIs first, and then we shall test the application once we have sufficient number of route implementations available with us. The next endpoint that we are going to implement is to get all the tasks that have been created so far. And this is going to be the easiest route that we will probably write for this application. So I will probably add some comments as well. So this is for creating a task. The next is going to be for get all tasks. Now for getting all tasks, I am going to use the request method to be get, and here the name of the route or the endpoint is going to be tasks. Please note this S that makes it plural. And the callback function that it will accept is, I am going to write some logic into that. And that logic is going to be quite simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simply make use of this response object. I will say I want to return a JSON response back to the user, and what I want to return as JSON response, I simply want to return this tasks array that I have already created as a global variable in my application. So whatever tasks that would exist in this array, they would simply be returned to the user. If no task exists, then we are going to be returning an empty array back to the user. Okay, you could also probably add some custom logic in case no tasks are found. You could probably even write error message depending upon your use case, but probably we will include that requirement in the next API that we will write. So this is to get a desired task. And here we are looking at a specific task that we are trying to retrieve from the tasks array. And what I'll do is I will copy this itself and I will paste it here. This time the endpoint name is not going to be tasks. Instead, it is going to be task because we are looking at one task this time. And in order to accept a unique identifier that will help us in identifying that which task needs to be returned back to the requesting client, I will accept an ID. So this is how you could create dynamic parameters or path parameters in Express.js while defining your routes. And this ID is a variable that you can also use in the callback function that you have here in this get method. So talking about what will be the logic that we will make use of here, it's going to be simple. What we'll do is we will first try to find out a task from a tasks list which matches this given ID in this request path parameter. If we find it, then we will return that. Otherwise, we could return an error that we were talking about returning from this tasks endpoint as well. So the logic I am going to be writing here is tasks.find, and let's say task. Then I would say task.id. Here also I could add a type annotation saying that this task belongs to the task interface, or the annotation given here is task. If this is equals to what? If it is equals to request dot params dot, and now we can use the variable name that is available as a path parameter here. That is this ID. Now, if this is present, if this task is present, then of course we can return that as it is. But what happens if this task is not present? So we will first handle the case where this task is not present. And if task will not be present, we are going to get undefined from this find method. So if it is not available, we would say res.status, say 404. 404 means not found. And we could also return a JSON response saying task not found. Simple enough message. Nothing fancy here. So this is all we are going to do if we wish to get a particular task from the available tasks that we have created so far. All right, so this was for getting a desired task out of the tasks array that we had. Now it's time to write a route implementation for updating a task. And for updating a task, there could be things that a user wish to update, and there might be things that the user wants to leave as it is. So in order to update a task, I am going to use this route implementation, where what does it do is it uses the put method, the HTTP put method, and the endpoint is almost the same as we just implemented. For getting a desired task, it's just the HTTP request method that differentiates between these two implementations. What does it do is it tries to find out a given task from the tasks array that we have. If the task is not found, then we simply return an error here. And if the task exists, in that case, we are going to look for certain things in the request body: name, deadline, reminder at. And if you will look at the logic here, it says task.name equals to name, and we are using this null coercion operator, where what happens is that if this value is either null or undefined, then only the value that is returned to the right hand side of this operator would be returned. If this is value or if this value is not null and neither undefined, then in that case, whatever the value of name will be would be assigned to task.name. If you look at task.deadline, what happens is you check whether deadline was provided. If so, then you update the existing task with a new deadline. Otherwise, you leave it with the existing deadline that it had. If the reminder at is provided this time, you update it. Otherwise, you leave it as it is. And you are updating this updated at flag for this particular task just to represent that this task was actually updated at a later time after it was created. So this was all about the update operation. Now, talking about probably the last operation in the CRUD list is going to be deleting a task. Okay, so for deleting a task, we are going to use the same thing, the exact same endpoint as we have used for getting and updating a particular task. Just that we are going to replace this get method with the delete, and we will first try to find the task. If the task is not found, then in that case you would say task not found. And if the task is found, then what we could do is we could directly update this tasks array itself with what? With the value tasks dot filter. And in this filter, we could say that task dot id should not be equals to the id that was provided in the params of this request. The problem here is that we are trying to overwrite this tasks array. And if you will look at the declaration of this tasks array, then it was created as a const. And const variables cannot be redefined later, or they cannot be overridden later. So in order to get rid of that error, I would convert it into let, so that this would allow me the overrides for this particular array. And after I do that, what I would do is I would say rest.status 200, and I could return JSON, or I could also return using a simple text message. And here I could say task deleted. All right, so this was the route implementation for deleting a task. So looks like we are all done for implementing the CRUD operations that are related to a particular task. Now, the last thing that we are left with is to probably a couple of things. One thing is that we are yet to implement a route implementation that will allow us to mark a task as completed. Whereas the other route implementation we are yet to implement is to fetch all the tasks, whose reminder at parameter value matches a certain criteria. So let us first implement endpoint, which is going to allow us to mark a task as completed. Mark a task as completed. And for that, I am going to use this, where what I do is I first try to find out the required task for which the status has to be changed. If the task is not found, we return an error saying task not found. And if the task is found, we shall update its completed at date, the completed at timestamp and the updated at timestamp. Okay. What we could even do is we could have a Boolean parameter that is going to tell you whether this task is still overdue or completed or something like that. But for now, we are leaving that and we are okay updating the completed at timestamp for this. All right. And finally, the last thing that we are going to be implementing is to get or fetch all tasks with reminder at let's say set to time within 1 hour from now. Okay, so we are looking at all the tasks whose reminder at value falls in a range that starts at the time the request is being sent and the timestamp that would be 1 hour later from that. And in order to get that, we are going to be using this logic where what we do is we say that what is the current time and what will be the time after 60 minutes. So for getting the time after 60 minutes, we are saying now.getTime. This is going to return us the milliseconds value for the current time. And we are adding 60 multiplied by 60 into 1000. So 60 minutes have, each minute has 60 seconds. Every second has 1000 milliseconds. So that is what we are adding to the current milliseconds value. And we are trying to find out all the tasks where the reminder at value is greater than now, the current time, and less than or equal to the time that will come 1 hour later. And whatever the tasks that we will get from this operation, we are simply returning those tasks. Okay. All right. So looks like we are all done implementing probably all the routes that we desired to implement for this particular application. But we need to talk about one more thing. And that thing is that for this particular application, we are trying to parse the request body. And in order to parse the request body, we also need to add a middleware that will allow Express.js to parse the request bodies and provide the parsing result as the JSON for the relevant request handlers. For example, the request handler for creating the task, for updating the task, or any other route handler that probably requires some level of parsing from the request body. And in order to apply that middleware across all the routes in the application, what we are going to use is we are going to use app.use method. And here, the middleware that we will make use of is going to be express.json. So this will allow us to parse the request bodies in the JSON format. All right. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to start our application. Let's see if our application starts. So let me clear our terminal and say npm run dev. Okay, so if I do so, my application is running. I shall go to the Thunder client, and here in Thunder client, I am going to make certain request. Okay, let me first quickly get rid of these warnings that are coming in our way. So we have this one route, we have another route. So, okay, all right, we have two paths available with us, or two different requests available with us. Let me open it in a new tab so that we could send multiple requests at the same time. Let us first see that what happens if we try to fetch a list of all the available tasks that exist in this application so far. So the endpoint for that was tasks, and the request method was also get. And if I will try to hit the send button here, you would see we are getting an empty array here because no tasks have been created so far in our application. Okay, so it's time to basically create a task. And in order to create a task, I will have to make a post request to an endpoint called task. And now this endpoint requires some things or some parameters to be sent in the request body. And in order to draft the request body, I shall come to this body section of this Thunder client extension. And here I am going to provide that which all things this request will require. So if we look at, we actually require these three things: name, deadline and reminder at. The deadline needs to be a date. The reminder at also needs to be a date, and name could be anything. All right. So what will I do is I will write this here. The name, let's say, is going to be task A. The deadline, let's say, is going to be 2025, say 07 17 July. Okay, I have added an extra hyphen there, and the reminder at, maybe I could skip putting a reminder at here, because the only things we are looking at for the validation purpose, they are name and deadline. And if we provide name and deadline, then that would be sufficient. And if the reminder at is not present, in that case, it would be initialized or assigned a value of undefined. That is perfectly fine with us as of now. So let us see what happens if we try to send a request to this endpoint. So let me click on send. And what it does is it sends us the response 201 created. That means the request was successful and it has created this task for us. It has given this ID. What I'm going to do is I am going to store this ID at some place. So probably what I could do is, okay, I could add this ID here itself, ID1. Though, any additional parameters that we will send in the request body will simply be ignored. So I am just keeping it here so that I keep a track of which all tasks do exist in my application so far. And if you look at the name, then it is task A. The deadline was 2025 7/17. So this is the same time that is also set as the deadline. The created at is going to be the time when this particular task was created, and updated at is going to be the same. And if you look at it, there is no reminder at field because it is set to undefined. That is why it was not provided in the response. Let's do one thing. Let's create another task. So say it is going to be task B, and the deadline I am going to set, let's say this time it's going to be 19th of July 2025. And I'm sending this ID. This will simply be ignored because none of the middlewares or the request handler look at a property named ID1. So let it. And if I click on send again, then you can see that it creates another task for us with the details that we requested. The name is task B. The ID is generated randomly using UUID function. The deadline is set to 19th of July. The created at is set to the current timestamp whenever the request was, operated or handled by the server. And what I'm going to do is I am going to add this ID2 here as well, so that whenever we need to delete, update, etc., we can refer this particular thing. All right, now what we have done is we have created a couple of tasks. Now let's see what happens if we try to get a list of the tasks that exist. So if I hit send button here, then you could see we are getting a list where we are getting two objects. And these two objects are the two tasks that we have created so far. All right. What happens if I try to get a task whose ID is 1? Remember, I am trying to make a GET request here to an endpoint called /task/ the ID. This is the endpoint which is going to return us a task that will match the ID that is provided in the path parameter. So let's see what happens if we try to send this request. So if we try to send this request, it says 404 not found. That means this particular task does not exist in the database or in our application. But what happens if I try to provide it an ID that does exist for a task definition? So if I try to hit it, then it simply returns me the details of that particular task, the ID for which was provided in the request here. Okay. Now, what happens if we again change it to 1 and make a put request? Now, put request means we want to make some changes to the existing resource. And if we want to make changes, we generally prefer or typically prefer put request method for that purpose. Here, if I try to send this request, then it says task not found because of course this ID is not present here. But what happens if I try to send it? And here in the body, I wish to update the task. So for updating the task, what I'm going to do is I am just going to borrow the name part from here. That means I am only interested in changing the name. And let's name the task to be task B. And here I would just add updated here. Okay. The moment I hit the send button, it says 200. Okay. Now, one thing that I want you to take a look at is this updated at parameter. This updated at parameter is now different from this created at parameter. The created at parameter was 16th July, 1844, 27 seconds, but the updated at is 1848, 44 seconds, right? So this is different. All right, so we were able to update a task as well. Now, probably what we could do is we could also update the the deadline as well. For example, if we want, we could even update the deadline. But instead of updating the deadline, maybe what we should do is we should update the reminder at, so that we also get to test the last API that we had implemented in this application to fetch all the records which have the reminder at set to certain value. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take this reminder at. I am going to put it here. I'm going to put it here, and I need to provide it a value that should fall between the current time and the value that would be or the value for time that would be 1 hour later, right? From the time of sending that request. So for that, maybe what we could do is, since this is directly passing this reminder at as it is to this date constructor, maybe we could generate a time value, let's say 15 minutes from now, and we could pass that value in the reminder at field, so that the reminder at value is updated with a value 15 minutes later from the current time. And in order to get the value for 15 minutes later, maybe what I would do is I would firstly open a terminal here, and I would create a new shell, and here I would open node in the interactive mode, right? If I say date dot now, then I get the milliseconds value for the time when this particular program or statement or function call was run. But what if I wish to get the timestamp for for a timestamp that is 15 minutes from now? So what I would do is I would say date dot now plus the value that we need to add here is 15 minutes, since each second has 60 seconds and each second has 1000 milliseconds. So this is the value that we will add, and this is the value or the the timestamp value for the time 15 minutes from now. So I am going to use it, and in addition to that, I am going to come back to the terminal where our application is running. Since we have no logs present in this application, so we don't need to even look at the terminal. And here in the reminder at, what I'm going to do is I am going to provide this integer value as it is. I am not wrapping it inside the double quotes. So this value will be parsed as it is in the request handler, and this will again be given as an integer value or as a number value to this date constructor, and hopefully it should be able to update the reminder at property for that particular task. Let's see if this works or not. If I click on send, then you could see that it had updated this task. The updated at value got also updated. Previously it was 1848 something. This time it has become 1852. In addition to that, the reminder at value is also present here, right? All right, so looks like we have tested almost all the route implementations except deleting a task and marking a task as completed. So probably let's try testing this particular task first, that is this complete one. So let me come back here, and this BB, that is the first ID, is the one which has this reminder at value present for the timestamp that is 15 minutes away from now. So what I'm going to do is I am going to mark this particular task as completed. So I will copy this from here, and the endpoint for that is task/id/complete. So task/id is there /complete, and the method of the request is also post here. And it does not require anything in the request body, but doesn't matter if we are even sending anything. So it needs to be post. And if I click on, okay, if it is post, does it require anything? No, I don't think so. So that's fine. If I click on send button here, then you could see that the completed at timestamp is updated to the timestamp value, for the time whenever this request was handled by the server. And that updated at timestamp is also updated accordingly. Fine. So this is how you can mark a task as completed. Had there been a Boolean flag which would tell you whether this task is still pending, overdue, or completed, or something like that, you could also update that status value when you hit this particular endpoint. Now, the last thing, or the last API that we are yet to test for the CRUD operation is deleting a task. Let's first see what happens if you try to delete a task that does not even exist. So you try to make a delete request. Let's say I will simply remove this last B from there. And if I click on send button, then it says task not found, because of course, such a task is not present. But if I add that B here and click on send, then it says task deleted. Okay, looks like by mistake we have deleted a task which had that reminder at parameter present. So maybe what would I do is I would quickly take this and I would update it. So this would be okay, where is the update endpoint? So update is this task ID. So this should be changed to put. The task and ID needs to be provided here. Second ID. Name, I would say task A updated. And the reminder at value would still work because this was a value that was 15 minutes later from that time. Probably 15 minutes would not have been elapsed, so far. So if I hit this particular endpoint, then yes, we could see that this reminder at value is rather updated for this particular thing. Okay, fine. So we have also tested the delete behavior. Now the only API we are yet to test is this particular API, that is to get all the tasks whose reminder at falls between the current time and the timestamp that would be 1 hour from now. So in order to hit that, I am going to navigate to this route, that is /tasks/reminders/upcoming, and this is supposed to be a get request. This is supposed to be a get request, and as you might be able to guess, we should be able to get this particular task, that is task A updated, in the list of reminders that are pending between current and the timestamp that would be 1 hour from now. So if I click on send, you can see that we are getting this particular thing. Now, what we could do is we could probably get a timestamp that is say old timestamp, and we can again update this reminder at value with that old timestamp. And if we will hit this API endpoint once again, we should not get this task in the response list. So we would be required to get a timestamp for a older time. If we come back to terminal, we shall see there seems to be some error. It says cannot set headers after they are sent to the client. We must be making some logic executable after even returning the response. This error, I think, has just come once. So we have hit 3 such endpoints, which we have hit only once. One is this reminders. So here only we are sending response once. Complete also, we are only sending response once. Delete, we are sending response twice. So this seems to be the problem. So here we should add this return so that the control does not move forward beyond sending this response back to the client. So let me come back to this node, and here I would say date.now, and I am going to say subtract 45. So I want to get a timestamp for 45 minutes behind. So this is the timestamp for that. I would copy it. And one more thing to note here is that since we made a change here and our application was restarted, that means we will have to create a new task once again because the memory would have been flushed by now. So in order to create a new task, I think this already exists here. Maybe I would change it to A and we'll keep that deadline same here. We'll click on send. So this task got created. And if I will look at all the tasks that are present in my application, so we can see this task is present. So firstly, we shall update this task with the reminder at value. So this task would be updated with the reminder at value, and I again need to copy that since I copied something else into my clipboard. Yeah, this time we didn't get any error. Yep. So I would copy it once again and collapse this terminal. Would update this reminder at value and will also update the name of this task. So the moment I hit this request, you could see the reminder at value is now updated. Now, if I come back to my index.ts file and copy this path once again so that I can send a get request to this particular endpoint and click on send, then you could see we are getting an empty array here. We are getting this empty array because there is no such task present where the reminder at value falls between the current timestamp and the timestamp that would be after an hour from now. So this was probably a simple introduction for how you could perform CRUD operations on any given entity using Express and TypeScript, or in a TypeScript environment using Express.js as the framework. As you saw, this is quite simple. We have added a few of those route implementations, and currently we are storing all these tasks that are created inside the memory itself. And that is why whenever the program is rerunning or the application is restarting, the existing list of tasks is getting flushed away. Okay, now since we got that error, maybe what we should do is we should also add a global error handler, just like we saw in the previous lecture as well, that we could add, or we should add, error handler at the end of all the route implementations, so that even in case an unexpected error happens in our application, the application should not get crashed that time. So that's why we have used this error handler, which is going to accept a callback function, an app.use function, and the very first parameter is error. So we are simply going to return this internal server error message or something went wrong message to the requesting client. And for our reference, we are going to log it on the console so that we could debug or try to debug or find out the root cause for this error. All right. So to summarize, what we have done in this lecture is we have implemented all the CRUD operations for a task manager application. We even added some advanced handling like marking as task completed or fetching all the tasks whose reminder at is kind of due between now and the timestamp value that would be after an hour from now. In the upcoming lectures, we will learn how to modularize our application by separating routes, middlewares, and logic into different files. This will make the code cleaner, maintainable, and production ready. So far, since we are just trying to get a taste of how Express.js works, and we are trying to learn the concepts and the basics of this Express.js framework. That's why we are trying to keep things simple and try putting in everything into a single file. But now in the upcoming sessions, we should start exploring folder structure that we should adapt for creating production grade Express based TypeScript applications. So that's all for this lecture, and thanks for watching.